Thanks very much, Martine. Good afternoon to all of you, and thanks for inviting me back again. There's always a special atmosphere here, and it's great to be amongst South Africans. So welcome to all of you. And what I'm going to ask you to do to start is find someone sitting near you who you don't know and introduce yourself and tell them where you're from. Can you give me just to get me a glass of water if you can? Thanks. All right, let's get going. When I came up the lift, the first soccer hat I saw like this, which we're going to see all over the world in the next few weeks, and isn't that fantastic? It said we need each other, and I love that because South Africa is a place where people really need each other, and the nature of our country and where it's come from and where it's going is about this human dynamic. That's what's different about us, I think. So in the spirit of meeting friends and maybe meeting someone you haven't met before, I hope you met someone and hope you make contact and chat to each other as this exhibition continues. I'm very privileged to head up a business school, and as part of that responsibility, I get to come here quite often. I get to go to other countries, and of course, I get to travel around South Africa a great deal. So what I want to share with you a bit this afternoon is a bit about the journey of where we are, but not in the hard facts of an economics lecture or any of that, but rather just sort of some of the feel of what's going on and why it's so compelling, and I hope I'm able to do that. I was here a couple of weeks ago when the president was here on his entourage, and one of the things that occurred as part of the process is I was in my room on Sunday morning, early packing, and the BBC had their BBC business piece on, and I was sort of half packing. I'd been up late, and I suddenly heard, no, we're going to announce the Employer of the Year in the UK. And because I'm a business school professor, I'm always interested in which companies, and of course up came Nando's. And it reminded me of the first time I met Robbie Brosen, who's the entrepreneur who founded Nando's. I should firstly say that Robbie does look a bit like a chicken himself. He's kind of plump and healthy and makes a fair amount of noise and has laid a few eggs in his time. And I've always said to him, if you're the chicken, which way do you want to go, Nando's or KFC? And I think the answer is Nando's if you're the chicken, if you've got that hard choice to make. Anyway, the first time I met Robbie was at a big function, about 400 executives, and it was quite a formal event. And we were kind of dressed in suits in those days, in the evening, in the Carlton, in the Santon Sun. And Robbie was the guest speaker. I never met him before. And into the room walked a guy in a golf shirt, and he had a guy with him carrying a little bag, Selwyn, and I discovered it was Robbie, and he had this big, fat Mursa Portuguese chicken on his golf shirt. And he sat down and introduced himself, and I thought, okay, this is going to be different. And he got up to speak to this assembled group of executives, and he said, okay, there are 3 ways to make money. There was dead silence in the room. Everybody whipped out their pens. And he said, the first thing is, you've got to have gees. So everyone wrote gees down. In London, they might have said geese, but anyway. It's gees. And he said, gees is spirit. And he said, in Nando's, we try and build the spirit. And he went on a little bit about that. And he said, the second secret of making a lot of money and doing well in business is you've got to have gooi. You've got to get people to move. You've got to get people to hustle. And so he talked about how he built that into Nando's and their philosophy of making eye contact, engaging with people, and the soccer and how they built that in, and blah, blah, blah. And then he said, when you get gees and gooi, you make geld. I thought it's never got more complex. But to hear that being picked by its employees in the UK as the employer of choice really made me think about something I want to share with you this afternoon, which is South Africa is a country of champions, and I'm going to come back to this a little bit later. In writing my notes about what to share with you, I decided not to show you lots of PowerPoint slides, but to share 1 or 2 simple thoughts with you. And I think in life, I often say this to the MBAs, you've got 2 important choices that you must make The first is your parents. It's very important you pick the right parents. And the second is where you're born. It's very important you get that right. Now, I never know whether I'm blessed to have been grown up in South Africa or whether that's kind of one of life's challenges, because we have such a challenging country. And I've come after all these years of looking back over the journey of my life to realize it's a blessing. Because this is a country that is not normal. It is a restless, resilient, unruly, excitable, chaotic, sometimes dangerous place. It's a place full of opportunity and full of challenges. And it's not a normal country. It's just as simple as that. When you look in the mirror and you ask yourself, what's the story of being South African? It's an exceptional story by any standards. And there are many countries, I think, today that share this kind of emerging country turbulence, but it's just not, the typical kind of a country. And we are not just typical kind of people. We're different. And I'm going to try and touch on some of that. I know Cheryl de la Rey will be speaking later. The Vice-Chancellor will be talking a bit about some of these things. But let me touch on some of them. We do produce champions. I've just finished some research looking at companies. There's no country of our size that has produced this many global champion companies. Some of them are here. SAB Miller, Anglo American, De Beers, Investec, Old Mutual, and there are many others. It's an extraordinary fact of how we developed. Not all of it pleasant, some of it very awkward. That there's a frontier mentality, there's a can-do idea that has caused us to produce this disproportionate number of world-class companies in this flat world. And I think that speaks to the nature of South Africa. We also, of course, produce individual champions. Many of them you know through history. Some of them we don't know enough about. But even in today's modern world, South Africa produces extraordinary individuals. And I think it's part of the nature of these kinds of emerging countries where conditions are tough, where many people have a tougher start than you and I, who find their way and develop themselves. And most people, when I go to emerging countries and I see these great individuals, it's because they've had a tough start, that they build in the kind of resilience, the breadth of vision, the can-do attitude that makes for really making a difference. And I don't just mean here the great icons of South African history, the Desmond Tutus and the Beyers Naudés and all the other names we've come to be so familiar with. But I just also mean many, many individuals who play leadership roles because what is working around them isn't good enough, because they want it to be better, because they feel part of the process. And I think that is a hallmark of where we come from. South Africa as a country in the nations of the world also faces lots of challenges, but often performs amazingly. Sometimes, of course, it doesn't do well. It slips up. It snatches defeat from the jaws of victory. But other times, it really just seems to excel and produce things that are amazing. Certainly, in my lifetime, I would not have thought that, as Martine said just now, we would be hosting. I mean, if you'd said to me in the 1980s that in 2010 South Africa would host the most important sporting event in the world, I would have said, you've got to change my drug routine or lock me up. We've achieved incredible things. And, it may feel like a long time, but 15 years is a nanosecond in a nation's story. And in this nanosecond, we have turned the country around and upside down. And some of it I'm not comfortable with. And many people ask me in the exhibition hall, what do you think about the long term? I've spent my life worrying about the long term. I've decided to worry about what we do next. Because what we do is what makes a country fly, not what we fear most or what we naively hope for. Let's get on with it. And I think that getting on with it is such a key part of being South African.